So hi DJ.
Hi Lizia, how are you?
Good, very good. Thank you for having me here at Facebook. Tell me about yourself. What do you do at Facebook? What are your roles?
Absolutely. About myself, I was born in India and I came to US for higher education, and I have, by training, I'm an electrical engineer. Inside Facebook, I support open ecosystems. As you know, Facebook has been always on the forefront of pushing technologies in an open community fashion. In that particular effort, they have launched a project called Open Compute Project, which was launched in 2011, and that's the project which I support within Facebook. And what it really means is that we have collection of engineers and technologies which we always constantly are evaluating to bring it out in a right fashion into the open community. And the new thing which we are now starting to do is to look at technologies in the open community which perhaps can be brought back into the company, and that's the kind of area I work in.
How do you actually try to promote your ideas and get engaged people in these open communities?
So that's actually a very good question. Facebook is a very diverse and fast growing company, and our organization is also fast growing. So there are people who have different level of exposure to open compute. So my interaction depends very much on the type of people I work with, and within our infrastructure team we have many different areas where people are involved in terms of contributing to Facebook infrastructure. So in some areas people have a good understanding, in some areas they don't, and my role is to navigate and modulate how much where to contribute and to help people figure out the right approach so that their work has the maximum impact both inside and outside Facebook.
So can you tell me a little bit why both employees inside Facebook, but maybe in other companies as well, should or could participate in the open communities, open compute project? What are some of the key values for them?
Absolutely. So, the world has changed in some very subtle and structural ways in last, I would say, 20 years. And it's partly because of the rate at which the information can now flow across organizations, across people, across the planet, across the globe in such a seamless fashion that people have started finding ways to get ideas from diverse set of areas. It's no longer that one company has a monopoly over innovation or idea. Ideas can come from anywhere. One particular person in middle of Asia or Europe or Africa or Australia or wherever, they even have ability to make an impact. What does that mean in terms of how companies should operate? What it means is that companies should consciously think of tapping into this bigger resource which is outside the company, where they can perhaps get inspiration or even better get ability to use certain idea and technology without any issues. And in many cases that is the case because people are very happy to see their ideas see the light of the day, and that can be done through open communities. That's exactly where a project like Open Compute becomes very important, because when you participate in these kind of projects, it helps you to create connection with other like-minded people, which help you to scale your thought process. It helps you create brand, because this is where now everybody is gathering together. So it's almost like, imagine you are in a city and you want to go to a nightclub where most people are hanging out. Doesn't matter where the nightclub is. It may not be in the fanciest hotel. It could be by the side of a river bank, but you would still like to go there versus going to a 5-star hotel. It's the same thing, lot of innovation now is happening in open community, and that's where you want to be versus in closed rooms of your company, where you might still be doing interesting work but not at the same scale and pace.
Okay. I also know that you have quite a good experience in creating good presentation, creating events. How do you come up with creative ideas? How do you get this inspiration? What do you do? What are your practices?
Right. So it's actually a very interesting question which I have thought about myself, because it's a question I put to myself to see how I can better understand myself. There are few things which I can point out which has helped me. Perhaps it can help others. I don't know if that's a process which you can follow, because by definition creative process actually has no process. It comes out of nothingness. So it's very difficult to say how can I create something out of nothingness. It's a step function. It's not a linear function with some predictable sequencing to it. You are not there one moment and suddenly you are there in another moment. But there are few things you can do in terms of practice which can enable your creative process. So I will list 3 things which I think is important. You want to connect with as many different and unrelated topics as possible without actually having any intentionality. What it means is that you should be very open to scrounging ideas from all different places and just keep it in your library of your ideas. You don't know when you will use them, but suddenly they will come to that. Second, there is some amount of active thought process which you have to cultivate, where if you are walking by the side of the street and you see, let's say, street lamps, maybe it's worth your time to think of how can I do some crazy things with these street lamps, and let your mind wander. That's a second exercise. So letting your mind wander in an arbitrary fashion is very important. And then the third thing I would say for creative process is you actually can look at art, music, and try to connect with anything which you find connection with, and then go deeper into that area, because that is maybe perhaps your passion. It could be poetry, it could be literature, it could be anything, it could be clay, it could be anything. And that actually gives you a core practice which then you can use to kind of throw in different places. So those are the 3 things I would say, open to ideas, collect them, do this exercise of randomly looking at things and doing some interesting mind exercises with things. And third, connect with art in some meaningful way so that it becomes part of your ritual.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. And my other question is, how do you cope with failures? Because like when we work on creative ideas or innovation technology, there is a big chance of failures. So how we as individuals can cope with these failures? Do you have some advice?
Absolutely. So the framing is very important in my mind. What do I mean by framing? If you ask one person what failure is, they will think of it as a step back. Oh, I lost something. I have to start all over again. If you ask another person, they would say, failure was awesome because I learned 3 things and it became actually a stepping stone. So drawing on the art analogy, I remember many years ago I was in Philadelphia Art Museum, and there is a very famous exhibit by Marcel Duchamp, who is a French artist, and if I recall, the name of that artwork is a woman with a bride with 7 men or something like that, and it's an abstract art. It consists of a bicycle wheel, it consists of few other odds and ends, but the most interesting thing which I thought was it consists of a broken piece of glass. And when I was reading through the description, they were talking about it, that when they were putting the art piece together, they had a fully complete glass and it fell and it broke. Right there is an example of failure in action. They were trying to put something and it failed. But the artist kind of interpreted it in a completely different way, and he said, now my art is complete. So he absorbed failure into the creative process. That's the way you want to create narrative in your mind. Absorb the failure as a part of your creative process. Then you actually can be happy at times when you are failing, because by failure you got a signal of what not to do, which is very, very important signal. And knowing that knowledge gives you power. So you should actually celebrate that. Don't go overboard, don't keep failing, that's not right. You need to learn from it. And sometimes you find people celebrate failure like crazy. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is try to internalize learnings from your failure so that you don't repeat those again.
There is a different perception of failure in different parts of the world. For example, here where we are right now in Silicon Valley, it's quite common that people get new ideas, and sometimes they fail. But it's not true for the rest of the world. Not always. So would you say that we still need to adopt this type of framing, or what is the relationship with the environment where we are in?
So it's interesting. I don't think the framing which I'm talking about is related to the environment at all. In fact, I am a big fan of biology and evolutionary biology and those principles, again drawing on diverse set of ideas. So if you look at human baby, how do they learn to walk? They learn to walk through collection of failed steps where they are falling. And that is very important, because when you have never walked ever in your life, when you try to stand, it's a very strange feeling, and your muscles and your body is not familiar with, and you will fail. Show me one baby on this entire planet when you were a baby or I was a baby and we took steps without falling. I would be surprised to find anybody who is like that. So that framing exists. It's just that some parts of the world recognize and other parts of the world have forgotten about it, even though it's all around them. They go inside their family or anywhere, some kid trying to learn bicycle and falling down, it's everywhere. So we just have to remind ourselves.
What would be your advices for people who wants to do innovation, who wants to come up with creative ideas? What would you advise them?
So there is many paths to creativity and innovation. So I can give advice with my perspective, which may not be all encompassing, but there are a couple of things which I think are universal in some sense. First is very important to be intellectually curious. You should always be going a little bit beyond in terms of why something is happening, why this, why that, and try to have some kind of a thought process in your mind to analyze situation rather than consume it like how we consume media on TV without processing. So being intellectually curious is very important for innovation. Second, recognize that innovation doesn't mean building flying cars and doing science fiction. That is not the only definition of innovation, because that's how we view innovation. If I ask somebody to draw innovation, they will think of drawing rockets and satellites and going in outer space. Yeah, there is innovation there. But innovation is very simple also. Innovation is in terms of new way of thinking and doing something. You know, I could innovate a recipe which I'm cooking in my kitchen. That's an innovation. So recognize that innovation doesn't require you to do some crazy things. You know, instead of adding a hot sauce, maybe I'm going to add a sweet sauce and create a completely new dish. Nobody even thought about it. Why not? That's also innovation. And the third thing which I would say is what you addressed earlier, embrace failures. Remember, don't be afraid of failures, because path to innovation is only through failures. I don't know, there's some number, you know, Thomas Edison had to go through 200 plus designs, or
yes.
I don't know how many designs, and this is endless. You hear this kind of story all the time. Failure is an integral part of the process, so embrace failure. So those are the three things: intellectually curious, innovation comes in all forms and sizes, and embrace failures.
Do you also think that those characteristics can help someone to become more innovative? For example, what are the characteristics of a person that wants to be innovative again and again? Do they need to have a specific traits?
Actually, I will stop short of qualifying traits because I don't believe in these kind of segmentation. I think innovation is not external traits, innovation is internal mental traits or mindset. And we already covered some of that. So I think being intellectually curious, for example, is a trait which anybody can learn. Don't be cognitively lazy. Now, it's not always easy to be cognitively sharp. So what are simple things you do? Make sure you get good night's sleep. You want to do a creative work tomorrow? Don't be partying late into night and then expect your brain to be sharp, because it's not going to be. So there are very simple things you should do in terms of the behavior. So I wouldn't call it as a trait, meaning it's not innate. I believe innovation can be within anybody, because remember, innovation in my definition is not big. It can come as big or small. A child can innovate a flying of a kite. Why not? But being fresh in your mind, being in emotionally happy state is very important. Or being in a passionate state of emotion is very important. So be involved with what you're doing, with full involvement, and things will unfold.